Okay, I think that's everybody in. So hello, good to see you all. Thanks so much for making the time to be with us tonight. I'm going to be looking at really what it says on the tin there, is making decisions simpler. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Suzanne Jacobs. I'm a behavioural and organisational behavioural specialist. So my academic research is into the neurobiological factors for trust and intrinsic motivation. What does that really mean? It's about getting the best from your brain, staying well, and staying on top of your game. So making decisions is very much part of that. So there's an enormous amount that we could cover around decision making and making it simpler. But I hope over the next 30 minutes, I can bring you some useful tips and techniques. They're all research-based. And I'm going to give you a little bit of knowledge behind it, a bit of science behind it, and then hopefully give you some takeaways that you can think about in terms of how to just really go about making some decisions, whether they be the small ones or perhaps some of the bigger ones that we face in life. So that's me. We're going to really think about this as we go through. But first of all, just to start off in terms of decision making, we all love to think that we are rational beings, fully in control of all the decisions we make. We're making the choices, we're totally conscious of them. But actually, you're not. All your decisions that you make are at the basis of our subconscious. So in our emotions, it's emotions first. In decisions, emotions they're often divided into those that are anticipating the future and those that are immediately experienced when we're trying to deliberate which way to go. And of course, our decisions are biased on our beliefs and our past experiences, and which often unconsciously put up barriers to our progress. Our cortex, so that the home of your ability to be able to make decisions and the ability to be able to deliberate and rationalize, is actually quite a relatively new part of our brain. Our ancient part of our brain, right in the middle, it's the seat of our emotions, continually influences our rational brain, for better or for worse. And most often without any conscious awareness at all. So there's a wonderful game that's been long used in neuroscientific research called the ultimatum game. Now, I want you to pretend you're the recipient in what I'm about to describe, just to give you an idea of how our emotions guide our decision making without us even realizing it. So let's say one player is given £10 and that player is asked to split this with another player. You're the other player. The other player, you can choose, the person who's got the £10 can choose to split it in any way they like. They can give you absolutely nothing, or they can give you the full £10. If you accept, then you both get to keep the spoils. But if you refuse, which you're completely free to do, then neither of you get anything. Now, of course, the rational decision here, the rational choice, is to accept anything from a penny, because it's more than you've got to start with. But when offers are perceived by our emotional brain as unfair, they are consistently rejected and everyone loses. But it's because it can then feel like an emotional win. When the brains are scanned, they reveal increasing levels of anger and disgust on the recipient. So you. So think about, if I had the £10 and I chose to give you, a pound or 2p, would you accept it? Would you rather get nothing and I get nothing instead of having an unfair reward? But what we sometimes do then in that situation is that because we think we're being rational, we post-rationalize and we argue that it felt right. It was absolutely the right decision to do. And that justifies our actions and our behaviors. Now, it's not that your rational brain is completely offline. in the face of really significant danger, it can be taken offline completely. It's just that this part of your brain, this part of rational brain, your conscious self, just isn't as strong as the emotions, and it often loses out. But what I want to really say here is in decision making, it's really important to know that you need both. You need your emotions and you need your rational brain to make your absolutely best decisions. Because one of the things we do know is that those people who have experienced brain damage to the emotional centers of our brain, sort of deep in something called the limbic system, they can no longer effectively listen to their emotions. And these individuals can carry out tasks and they apply their IQ, they can still carry out things, but they can't, because they can't process their emotions, they can't make decisions, basically because they just can't feel anything about them. They can't judge which way's right. And sometimes we get these emotional signals in the form of gut instincts or hunches. But the thing is our ancient brain, this emotional center, holds all our experiences and all our learning. And we need to be able to tap into those resources to make sense of the current challenges and decisions that we need to make. So it's sort of like being able to manage the conversation between the rational and the emotional brain, which is why, of course, improving your emotional intelligence, which is that conversation really, is so important to significantly improving decision making. Now, I'm not going to look deeply into emotional intelligence, but I really just wanted to set the scene as to how we really go about making decisions. So how can we make some better ones? So the first thing is I want you to think, just have a think and mull around in your head. What is most valuable, most important in your world? And it's from this basis that you can hang every decision from. So maybe it's your family, maybe it's health, learning, travel, friends, spirituality, and so on. These are yours, they are personal. Now, when you think about what's most valuable in your life, and it really is important to think about these, when you've got the headlines, so perhaps let's take health. One of my valuables is health, but my definition of health to me may be different to your definition of health. So once you've got the adjective or the term, sorry, the noun, it's really important to define what that means for you. What does it mean in terms of family or friends or your spirituality, learning, travel, or whatever it is that's most important to you? These are your seat of fulfillment. It's your sort of your purpose as to why you do everything, really. Now, because these play such a critical part and role in your life, creating this list of valuables, and it's a term I've used, will really help you to simplify decisions. It creates a decision tree, which is why there's an image of a tree on the screen. And it allows you to not only make decisions, simplify them, make them quicker, but it also can help us avoid regret. So let's say you face some of the bigger decisions in life. If you start from the position of your valuables, you can focus on how your next steps either help or hinder each of them. So, and this really happened to me, taking that job in another country may not feel as enticing when held up against your valuables, if it compromises your time with your children's education, or even your relationships. So on a day-to-day basis, use your valuables to guide you. How are you turning up and servicing, nurturing, supporting each one of these every single day? You know, we can get so wrapped up in the day-to-day, the tasks, that we can accidentally veer away from what is most important. And we can take these things for granted as well. And so perhaps don't focus on each of them as much as we really need to ensure that they remain cared for. There's a wonderful term, and some of you may have heard it, in Japanese called ikigai. Now, whilst it's not a direct translation, it fits beautifully with this concept of valuables. So it's essentially, if we're going to translate it, it's the reason for why you get up in the morning. And it's a word that means value in living. And Japan has some of the longest living citizens in the world. And the National Geographic, along with explorer Dan Buettner, carried out research. It's nearly 4 decades long, this piece of research, into longevity. And their research has found areas in the world that they call them the blue zones, where people live good quality lives much longer than everywhere else in the world. And one of these zones is Okinawa, which is where Hige is used. But it's used in reality. It's a remote island with a remarkably high number of centenarians. Now, while their diet, their social connection, and the way they exercise has got a huge amount to do with why they live longer, but what they've shown in the research, and this goes back to those valuables, they equate a sense of purpose, living life to the things that are most important, with meaning in our lives. And they've equated this to an extra 7 years in life. I mean, that's quite significant. So we can make our decisions against what is most important to bring clarity in our choices and then simplify our direction. The things that are most valuable to us are the things that bring us joy, they bring us fulfillment, because they bring us purpose, they bring us a sense of meaning. In fact, it's why For Life's Sake is called For Life's Sake and has a strapline, living life on purpose. Deliberate choices that support the things that are most valuable. So take some time to really think about that, write them down and define them. But to add to that, to take this a bit further, and some of you may have done some work on your own personal values, these are hugely important. So whilst your valuables are sort of the why you do something, your purpose, your values are your how you go about doing things. So to just for a moment, have a think to yourself, and maybe even write them down as I'm talking, maybe 2 or 3 things that you believe to be the right way of doing things. Now, these are your guiding principles. These are your beliefs about how you live your life. So it could be always being punctual, always being kind, honest, integrity, whatever it may be for you. Again, exactly like your valuables, take time after this session to really think about them. And I'll talk a little bit about how you find your values, but take them and define them. So this is how you go about doing something. So this is, rather than just the why as the purpose, this is how you go about interacting with people, how you show up, how you behave, how you act. And of course, this is affecting your decision making. So it's really what you believe to be morally and ethically right. Now, making decisions that break your values are uncomfortable, and they leave us with a bad taste and self-recrimination, regret, guilt. As I said, it takes time to reveal your values, which actually also incidentally support your strengths as well. If you Google values, and after the session you can put in values, personal values, and you will find it's not a completely unexhaustive list of adjectives, as I say, from punctuality to kindness to honesty to integrity, all these wonderful words. Define them for yourself, but once you've got that heading, and what constitutes what your values are is what will really start to guide your decision making. Values are a source of energy, and they're a source of motivation. So just think for a moment about how you feel when you're acting in line with what you believe to be right, or versus how you feel when you start to compromise them. So let's say one of my values is honesty, and my definition is to offer the truth with respect and kindness, no matter how difficult that may be. If I dishonor that value, and maybe I lie, or maybe I betray or hide or deceive a friend, then I'm likely to feel pretty bad. And that affects my energy and it affects my motivation. So one of the best ways to uncover your values is to observe your day and notice the way you choose to behave. and interact. So did something you say, how you acted, how you behaved, did it feel good, comfortable, energizing, or was it to the contrary? What value were you supporting or undermining? And I say, just take time to actually uncover these. Values allow us to assess decisions. It's the sort of, if you can hold up that proverbial mirror to yourself and know you've acted within your values, even the choice, even if it was a hard one, it will abate regret. So these are the sorts of examples of core values. And as I say, you take your time to actually uncover them and understand what they are for you and allow them to guide you in your decision making. But one of the things that actually is quite interesting about decision making is, and I don't know how many of you have perhaps set New Year's resolutions or set goals, and we look into the future and we say, yeah, I'm absolutely going to do that. I'm going to run the London Marathon next year. I'm going to, whatever it might be. So we set our eye line into the future. Now, what happens is that if it's too far into the future and it's too big and it's not clear enough, we quickly find ourselves avoiding, procrastinating, and of course we get off track. The ability to take the long-term perspective and to stick to it to achieve a goal is not as easy as our rational brain likes to tell us it is. Much of that traffic between our emotional brain and that newer part, our rational part of our brain, it's all about coming up with that rational goal, but it's devoted to the calculation of risks and reward. So we think that we are the only animals that can see into a horizon and get a reward in the present for what may flow into the future from a decision that we make today. But we are still tempted by the beast of instant gratification, which can completely skew our decision making, and it can take us completely off path. So it's that sort of, I'd rather take the £100 today rather than wait for the £1,000 in 2 years' time. Now, in behavioural economics, this has got a horrible term, in my opinion. It's called temporal discounting. What that really means is that when we set a goal into the future and we try to decide to keep to it, what we're doing is we're discounting the value of the future. So we then take the easy route, the quick route, the instant gratification route. So to counteract this normal way that we actually work around decision making and to support better decision making, we can bring the rewards for the long-term future into the present. And what do I mean by that? So we can imagine the spoils, we can say we want that long-term decision making, but if we treat ourselves at little milestones along the way, you're more likely to achieve the long term. So, for example, you might give yourself a reward of a cinema ticket if you've saved that £100 towards the bigger goal of, say, £5,000. Now, it's not one for me to explore in huge depth today, but actually I'm not a great fan of setting goals, actually. I'm not sure whether that's controversial or not, but I'll explain a little bit. We have all got deadlines, things that have got to be done by certain points. But if goals are not carefully aligned to what is most valuable to us, they are rarely achieved. And when, in fact, we focus on nurturing our valuables, the things that we spoke about at the beginning, and when we focus on those and nurture them every day, we find that actually you don't need goals, because we love to see progress and to feel in control. And sometimes when you write out goals, it can mislead us to thinking that we've got control. But the reward from supporting the things that are most important to us bring us value every day, bring us motivation every day, simplify our decision making, and you're more likely to keep achieving the things you want. And one of the things around this as well, the long versus the sort of the short-term gratification, if you reframe the decisions you're making each day as an investment towards your valuables rather than a hardship, it can really help. So the other thing around decision making is that I'm afraid thinking literally takes energy. So just planning the to-do list can leave us with little energy to decide what to do first, or even to carry out the task that you've set yourself. Planning your day the evening before can really help you start the day with the energy you need to crack on with the tasks you want to get done in that day. And actually, it'll also be of no surprise to you whatsoever. It's common sense that we should avoid making decisions when we are tired, hungry, or stressed. In these states, you literally do not have the resource to think clearly, but our brain will tend to seek the perceived easy option. So assuming you're not facing an immediate crisis and you have to make a snap decision, be aware of how you're feeling. If you can take time away to replenish your energy tank, you will not only give your brain time to assess the options better, but time away from a decision, space not to actively think about it, allows what is called the default mode attentional network in your brain. Don't worry too much about that, but it's a certain type of mode in your brain that you enter, but it's magical. It's the problem-solving area. Because your brain never stops working. It never stops trying to solve problems and to try and work out the best decision for you. But it does it best when you leave it alone. It's why your best ideas tend to come when you are not fully concentrating on tasks. You know, perhaps you're out walking the dog, or you're in the shower, going out for a run, whatever it might be. So decision-making consumes energy. So use the energy wisely and in the right state to make the best decisions possible. Now, I've said all our decisions are emotion space first, and our fears root themselves in this space. So making the best decisions for ourselves need to address the fears that arise. Some fears, of course, will be justified. Look, let's say I'm not going to suddenly walk into a lion's den. But our fears can also be really unhelpful, blocking, and sometimes they're actually downright wrong when we actually really do check out the evidence. So what we really need to do is just test our inner critic. Our inner critic can tell us we shouldn't, we can't, we're not worthy of doing X, Y, Z. We bring in perfectionism, imposter syndrome thinking, catastrophizing, all of which can really scupper us taking that step forward in the decisions that are best for us. So when you think about your decision, write out your worries and trace back your emotions. Does, say, what you're thinking about that new job, for example, give you worries of failure, which are scary? Now, with a coaching approach and more time, of course, you can start to peel that onion layers of what's really laying underneath the thinking and the fears, and to look at the foundation of our procrastination or excuses to stay put. But a technique to help us formulate a decision that is not only right for us, but one that we'll be able to tap into the motivation and courage to execute is simply flip the what ifs. We're wonderful at what ifing, catastrophizing, holding ourselves in place, excuses not to do something. But if we flip them, we actually have a word with ourselves, if you like. Just flip them around. What if it is a success? Do some mental forward planning, you know, that forward time travel, and see if you were going to, say, give a presentation, see it being a success. What if it really works? And notice the past tense here. When something went wrong, what did you do to put it right? You're pre-thinking and showing your brain that it has a sense of influence. Even if something goes wrong, I can overcome, I can do it. And actually that pre-thinking really helps should something go wrong, because you've already done the contingency planning. So we're almost there in terms of these decision tools. Now, ever taken a child into an ice cream shop, you know, one of those amazing gelato places, hundreds of flavors, standing there saying, what would you like? Come on, quick, quick, quick. What do you want? What do you want? The child can't make a decision. We get decision paralysis when we're faced with too much choice. Choice is great, of course, but too much choice. So in decisions that you're making, if you face yourself with overwhelm, not sure which way to go, can't see the wood for the trees, literally shrink it. Take the same child into the ice cream shop and there's only chocolate, strawberry and vanilla. decisions are much quicker and simpler and easier. So shrink those decisions down. Just try to take, we can't eat an elephant all at once, one bite at a time. And then, so last but not least really here is the cost of doing nothing in decision making. Now, I know it's a cliche, but we tend to regret what we don't do, not the things that we do for the right reasons. Now, we as humans, we suffer something called loss aversion, which basically means that we fear loss and feel it far greater than actually potential gains. So loss aversion is the observation that, and we can use it to our own support when we're making a decision. So if you think about the decision, something you would like to do, ask yourself, if I did nothing, what would I lose out on? What's the cost of doing nothing? And sometimes that can be really motivational, because we are more concerned through this loss aversion of losing than gaining. So use it to your advantage. Ask yourself, well, if I did absolutely nothing, what would I lose? So the awareness of this is a technique to help us in itself, but we can, as I say, we can use it to our advantage and a real motivator. So we're almost out of time, but over to you really. If there are any questions at all, feel free to unmute yourself, write something in the chat box. Really happy to take any questions. So if there's nothing there, I hope you've really enjoyed this 30-minute webinar. Do like our page, look us up for the more tips and techniques. We'll be putting out a lot of these things on our Facebook page. Take them, use them, notice what happens when you try out some of these things, and happy decision making, simpler decision making. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.